Hello and welcome to Grouchy Geeks episode 44. My name's Steve, my co-host is Scott.
Hello.
This episode we've got a bit of general news and reviews of things to talk about. Brand new year, brand new decade. And then for our main feature we're going to be talking about the book, the film and the forthcoming TV series Dune, which is going to be directed by Denis Villeneuve. Mm-hmm. And there's some things to talk about there, with the first part of the film coming out later this year. But before all of that, what news, Scott?
So I think it's pushing it to consider this news because we've known this for quite some time. But I just wanted to take a breather and take note that this is the last time we're going to be recording before we've seen the new Picard TV show.
Yes. It comes out next week, I want to say.
It comes out in 8 days.
Whoa,
so
okay.
A week tomorrow is... so I'm hoping for the best, but I'm worrying it's not going to live up to expectations. But we'll see. But
this is also, it's going to be released weekly. That's the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we will only have seen the first episode, first couple of episodes by the time we talk next time.
Yep.
So that's interesting. Very interesting. And it's already been renewed for season 2.
Yes, yeah, I heard that a few days ago. So everything that they're saying about it encourages me, but everything that I'm seeing about it makes it look like Discovery to me. But I'm just so hope it's going to be good.
I really do, given that I'm not a fan of Discovery. I'm hoping it's different enough, and for the fact that he's come back after all of this time. Patrick Stewart said, I don't want to just do the same thing 20 years later. What's the point? So I'm hoping there's something different enough that it's a worthwhile sequel and continuation of the story. But we'll find out in 8 days.
yeah. Big day. I'm going to lock myself alone in a very dark room just to watch it and try and absorb everything that's going on.
And if it doesn't work, you'll just flagellate yourself and expunge it from your body.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sticking with Star Trek news, it's now been discussion that my least favourite director, Tarantino, has now said he won't direct the film, but he still may be involved in a Star Trek film in an advisory capacity, apparently. So there's that. There's the other thing that there's now possibly a separate Star Trek film in development.
Yeah, it's very confusing, isn't it? So there's news of a new Star Trek film being done, not by Tarantino, but he's, I think, wrote a treatment, and then he was saying some very positive things about Star Trek, but he was basically, I'm not going to be involved in writing or directing it, but if they want to, it was something bizarre, like if they want to show me an early cut and get my advice, then I would be willing to do that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, thanks very much.
Yeah.
It's a really strange thing to say. But I'm glad to see it continuing because I think it deserves to, even though the third movie didn't do so well. But at least the third movie tried to do something new and original and a bit more like the original Star Trek rather than Into Darkness. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there and whether Picard being a success or not has any bearing on what they do with that film or whether they do it at all.
But there's that one, but then there's also the series creator of Legion and Fargo, Noah Hawley, who said that he's now back in discussions and he's developing a Star Trek film for Paramount as well, and saying that it's his own take on Star Trek and it goes back to all the things that he loves from The Next Generation. So I don't know if that even is going to be a film featuring the new crew or something completely different again. But apparently that is now in development to some degree.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know where it connects or how, but a brand new crew or what. But so it seems that Paramount, now that they've properly kind of reunited and brought all of Trek under one roof again, after all of the problems in the past that they've had, they're firing all guns. It's almost like they're trying to create the Star Trek universe in the way that they're doing a Marvel universe and a Star Wars universe. I have the feeling this is what they're trying to do with the films.
I mean, I think more than probably a lot of the other things they've tried to create a cinematic universe out of, it has enough depth and enough interesting things going on in that universe that they probably could create a cinematic universe out of it. I mean, after all they did before, where we simultaneously had Next Generation and Deep Space Nine running, and then simultaneously Deep Space Nine and Voyager running, and they would occasionally cross over with each other. So we kind of do have a precedent for them doing that in a light way. So it'll be interesting to see them doing it in the era of the cinematic universes that we have now. Yeah.
So I'm excited, especially the possibility of something very different and very new with a new voice behind it. So it's kind of a watch this space and see what happens, really.
Yeah, so lots happening in the world of Star Trek that we've not really had for a really long time.
No,
like we've had the movies come out, but that's they were kind of a little bit every so often. But it's been since it's been the 90s since we've really had Star Trek being a major thing.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I'm just hoping it's good.
Me too. Really do. Really.
So something that I read about a little bit earlier that I found really interesting. So we've talked a lot in previous episodes about the on again, off again saga of the adaptation of Brian K. Vaughan's Y: The Last Man. And some of the time we've talked, it was going to be a movie, and some of the time we talked, it was going to be a TV show.
Yeah.
And we because it was such an in-depth story, I think we were both more positive about the idea of it being a TV show rather than being a movie.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that's still on the cards in some form. But the news that I read recently was that they're now going to do a movie version of Brian K. Vaughan's Ex Machina. Yes,
this is a news piece that I had actually as well.
Which to me seems, even though it's a really big story and it encompasses lots of things, it feels to me like if you were going to do something as a movie, then Ex Machina is probably more. You can do something more standalone as a movie in that case, than you could ever hope to achieve with Y: The Last Man.
Yeah, there's just too much scope. Y: Last Man's a case of setting up something amazing, an interesting concept, and then telling lots of different stories within that. Ex Machina is more a case of there's an arc to the character, there's something that has to happen, there's looking back at the past of somebody, what they used to do, and then where they go from here. And yeah, I can see it working as a film. I think it is a little bit of a shame it's not a 8 or 10 episode one-off thing, but it seems that these days I don't think they want to do that with many projects. They want to make them run and run, so they get something that's got more depth, perhaps.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do with it. I think they can do some cool stuff with it as a film, and if it does well, then it could only make Y: The Last Man more likely to happen. Yeah,
I think that's still in development as a TV show, as far as I know. But there hasn't been any news on it for 6 months or more or something. So whether we get any news this year, I don't know. But I hope so. I think it'd be really good. Really, really good.
The unfortunate thing is they're not going to be able to call it Ex Machina because of the Alex Garland film that came out a few years ago.
Right.
So it's going to be called The Great Machine, which is which is his superhero name, I think.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, that's fine. Most people won't be familiar with the original source material anyway, as with many of these things. So it's only for you and I and fans who would be going, oh, well, that's a shame, but I understand why. But that's okay. That's all right. Last bit of news that I had was that I don't watch any of the shows anymore, but there's the Arrowverse DC shows that they're still going. There's lots and lots of them, Flash, Arrow, Legends, and all these ones, and Supergirl. Arrow is wrapping up. There's a spin-off coming from that. There's something else. There's a new one coming out that I actually might check out and watch the first couple of episodes because it interests me, and it's going to be called Superman and Lois.
Oh, yeah, I saw that you posted about this, and that's the only thing that I've heard about it, that it's going to exist.
Yeah, so they probably can't call it Lois and Clark because of the TV show that we had previously in the 90s called Lois and Clark, which is a shame, but there you go. And these two characters, the actors who play these, Superman and Lois, are in the kind of Arrowverse. They've crossed over into lots of other shows, and then these two are now spinning out, and they've got their own show, and it's already got a 13-episode order straight away.
Cool.
So it's going well beyond the pilot. So even if they go, nah, it's not working, but we get 13, so we'll get something interesting. And in an era when it was originally created, obviously Superman and Lois are both journalists. That's changed a lot since even the 90s TV show. I mean, with social media and everyone's got a camera on their phone and 24-hour news cycles. So seeing a story that focuses on journalism and superpowers and other things could be interesting, but my fear is they won't go very in depth. It'll just be a very surface show. But I don't know. That's probably just me being pessimistic.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I've heard positive and negative things about some of those DC shows. And so it looks like they're a bit of a mixed bag, but hopefully with Superman and Lois Lane, they're actually going to do a good job of it. But it's amazing how big and successful all those shows are. Because I remember hearing about the Flash show coming out and thinking, oh, well, I should check that out sometime. And then hearing like the Flash season 5 has just finished.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
It's like I blinked and all of a sudden
season 5.
There's just crazy amounts of content that they've produced in that particular bit of the DC universe. Yeah, there's
a Batwoman show as well. There's Black Lightning, I forgot to mention. So that's 2 more shows. I can't do with the 22, 24 episode thing anymore. It just feels like padding, and I just can't cope with it. So, but I think I'll try the Superman and Lois one just because I like the characters and the concept. I'm curious to see what they do with it in 2020. At least it's 2019 there. I'm living in the past. No, 2020. See what they do. It has to be a different show because of the era that we're in now. So, interesting. Do you have any more news?
Yeah, so something that I was kind of interested in your opinion of, because I know it was a comic series that you really loved, and what I've read of it I really liked, but I didn't read huge amounts of it.
Okay.
But relatively recently, I think within the last week, a trailer came out for the Netflix Lock and Key show.
Yes.
And I really thought that the trailer was excellent, but I'm interested as somebody that knows a lot more about that universe than I do. I'm interested to hear what you thought about it.
I think it looks brilliant. This is the second or even third pilot, I believe, that they've worked on, but this time Netflix went straight to series with it because the previous attempts, one was filmed, I think one was written, but they didn't actually film that one, and then this one. It looks brilliant. The cast look really good. The special effects are obviously top-notch. Netflix has got the money to throw at it. And you couldn't have done this in a film. There's no way you could. There's too many interesting concepts and the keys and the lock house. And it's also, I think it has to be finite. You know, some of the other shows can just run and run and run.
Mm-hmm.
This can only run really for about 5 years, maybe 6 maximum, because the trades are on a very particular arc, and that's it. They've done a couple of spin-offs to the side of it, but the story has a definitive start, middle, and end, and you can't go beyond that. So I kind of like it in a way. They've already got a roadmap. They already know where the story's going, and if they're following it to a certain degree in a TV show, it's not a case of following the beats, but I know that they're going to have to plan it carefully and plot it so that we know we'll get. It's not going to be stuck in that permanent second act kind of feel. Mm-hmm. So I'm very excited about it. It starts in February, I believe.
Cool. So not long. So somebody that doesn't know much about the universe and watched the trailer relatively recently before we recorded, there was a couple of things that struck me about it that seemed very interesting.
Okay.
So one was so these are both very shallow things, but one is the fact that actually even though the story might be quite dark, the way that it's been filmed it was actually quite light and quite colourful.
Yeah.
And that kind of feels like a bit of a relief after filming things that are with really washed out colours and are dark all the time, to actually go for sort of a different feel to how it looks. At least I thought it looked brilliant.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, and I could be completely wrong on this, but it felt like a plot where it had a chance of being slightly episodic. So rather than this vast story where every single thing is like just follows on from the previous one, it felt this idea of all of the different locks and following the different characters and how the story seems to be working, at least implied in the trailer, was it could be a bit more, and I mean this in a good way, a little bit more Monster of the Week type show. I don't know whether that is the case or not.
I think there'll be an element of that because there's the different keys and the different powers to explore, but there will be a growing threat that will build in the first season because it starts off as almost like a haunted house kind of thing. I mean, do you know the basic story?
I do from reading it a very long time ago, but it's about a bunch of siblings, isn't it, that inherit a house that has lots of locks inside it, something like that?
Yes. So this family, their father dies, the wife and 3 children inherit this house. They go to live there, and uncle sometimes comes to visit, but it's in the middle of New England. And it's in a very old house with a lot of unusual history to it. And the youngest son starts finding unusual keys, really interestingly carved and special keys. But as he wanders around the house, he realizes that some of the doors match, but you have to use the right key on them. And when you do, something happens. But at the same time, there's kind of a mystery surrounding the house. There's the story about what happened to the father. There's the ongoing problems of the kids coming to terms with his loss and the wife coming to terms with the loss. So there's these things that will build, but as you say, at the same time, there's some fun stuff to do with the keys that give them certain abilities. I think is the best way to say it.
Cool.
Yeah, very interesting to see what they do with it. It's one of these things I'll be binge in less than a week, and then think, I should have spaced it out more, because it'll be over a year to the next one. But yeah, looking forward to it.
Cool.
Right, that's all the news I had.
Yeah, that was it for me as well.
Okay, let's go on to the main feature.
Hello, welcome back. So for our main feature, we're going to be talking about Dune. This is both in the context of the Denis Villeneuve films, the first of which is coming out later this year, and also against the backdrop of the Frank Herbert books, which we've both read and really loved. I think it's both of our favourite sci-fi series.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Dune is probably my favourite science fiction novel ever, I think. I've read it so many times, and to the point where I bought the shelf porn version from the Folio Society with especially commissioned paintings in a hardcover slipcase.
Brilliant. They saw you coming a mile off.
They certainly did. Yes, I paid for it quite happily, and it sits on my shelf, and I love it. But yes, so the first part of the film is coming out in November this year, and it will tell roughly half of the story of the first book of Dune from 1965. Wow.
Yeah, so back in the day, it was. I don't think it was the book that invented the phrase ecologist, but it made ecologist a common everyday word that we know nowadays, because it talks about the ecology of this really interesting planet and how our heroes sort of fit into that brand new world. So so going back a long time.
So when did you first read the book?
So I can very distinctly remember that it was during my A-levels. So I would have been about 17 when I first read it.
Yeah.
And it's probably more than any other novel is I've read it more times than any other novel.
Yeah.
So, and got something out of it each time. And notice new things in there, and I just think it's stunning. I think it's the closest thing that we have in science fiction to the equivalent of the Lord of the Rings novels in fantasy or something like that. It just feels this amazing epic story that you can get so many different things out of. That's just, to me, it's just a phenomenal achievement.
It is. It's the perfect blending of different things as well, because if you go back and look at Star Wars, you can see that George Lucas was paying homage to lots of things that he loved growing up as a kid and that inspired him. And it was a blending of science fiction, fantasy, magic. The fact that they've got swords, shows that it's basically very obviously influenced by fantasy elements. And when it comes to Dune, you've got religion, you've got mythology, you've got science fiction with spaceships that travel through the stars, you've got these monstrous beasts in the form of the sandworms, you've got things that go beyond that when you get into things with the Bene Gesserit and the thing that Paul becomes, the Kwisatz Haderach, and all this kind of stuff. And then you get into the ecology and stuff, as you said, and there's so many layers, and it's the blending of things that I've not actually read much of Herbert's other work, but it's that thing of this was the perfect thing that brought together interests from his mind that created the perfect mix. And for some reason, everything clicked. And as you say, you go back and you read it, and I can see something new every time, because I'm different every time I read it. So it's revealing stuff to me and about me, which is interesting.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's set against. It's a sci-fi film, but it has lots of elements in it that I would traditionally associate with fantasy. So there's elements of it talking about a prophecy that runs through all of the Dune books.
Yeah,
and to do with, like you say, religion and mysticism and a society that in a lot of ways is very rigid and hierarchical and has an emperor that everybody needs to respect, and how these rival families work within that universe. So it's a really fascinating world that he's created that feels really well realized and real in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and the politics, and it's quite a complicated book in some ways. People think it's relatively simple, but there's a lot of layers to it, and that there are things, even though it was written in 1965, that echo what's going on now, and that's what the best science fiction does. It's talking about what's going on in the present, but also it can be reflected and used as something to hold up for any period of time, any period of history, and it really does that.
So what do you feel about the sequel novels before we start to talk about Denis Villeneuve's treatment of the book that we've obviously not gotten to see yet? But what do you think about the follow up novels?
I think they decline in quality with each one. I think that 2 and 3 are really, really short and they're good. I think when you get to 4, it's when so Children of June is I'm gonna have to check now, but I think Children of June is 3, and when you get to the 4th one, God Emperor of June, I think it is, it gets really, really crap. I think it was a case of people said that's really good, do another one, and then that's really good, do another, it's really popular, and the more it goes on, the worse it gets for me. That I finished the 4th one once, and I never want to read it again. What about you?
So I think the sequels. I think the first sequel is Children of June. Right. I could be wrong on that, and that's actually, I think that was a strong sequel. Then I think it goes significantly downhill after that. But right. I quite like God Emperor of June, but I think that's for me that was a relatively rare pearl amongst a lot of the rubbish that is things like Heretics of June, and then obviously there was a bunch of follower novels that were written much, much later by Frank Herbert's son Brian Herbert in conjunction with Kevin J. Anderson, and I've just not read any of those at all. I just assume that was kind of a little bit of a cash grab rather than actually, if they weren't by Frank Herbert himself, then I don't feel that compelled to have anything to do with them. Right. Okay. So June was the first one. Then it was June Messiah. Then it was Children of June, and then the fourth one was God Emperor of June. And I think that's the one where, spoilers for those who haven't read it, is where Leto has turned into a giant worm, and he's about 800 years old. That's the one that I read and thought, I never want to read this again. It was awful. I think the first time that I read it, I had exactly the same reaction as you did. But the last time I attempted to do the whole series, right? I remember quite enjoying it, and it was actually the one that comes after that, which is called Chapter House June, that I really struggled with. Right, I just didn't enjoy it at all. But I thought God Emperor of June was quite interesting. But like you said earlier, they're written in such a way that your reaction to them kind of depends on who you are at that particular point in time. Yeah, and that it's significant that the first time I read God Emperor of June, I really hated it, and then the last time I read it, I actually thought it was quite good. Yeah, I still think the first one is the best, and I've read that the most times. Oh, the first, absolutely. The first one I've read way more than any of the sequels. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. Yeah. So I don't know. I might go back and skip God Emperor and go to the next one, which is Heretics of June, which I have not read. It came out in '84. So, and then the one after that is the one that you read, was Chapter House. Chapter House, okay. So I don't know. I may go back and read 5 and 6, but so thinking of previous adaptations, did you watch the TV? So there's the film that we know, obviously, that was done by what's his name? David Lynch. Thank you. There's that one from 1984, but then there was the TV series that came out in year 2000. Yes, so first of all, I really like the David Lynch version, but it feels to me like you can only really get much out of it if you've read the books, because I don't think, if you don't know what's happening in the books, I think they're showing sufficiently small amounts of the story that it's kind of difficult to work out what's going on. Yeah. So I think for me, I enjoy the film, but I don't think it stands by itself particularly well. Right. Whereas I think with the 2000 TV show, I think they did a really good job of representing more faithfully what was in the books, and there's some particular bits in there that I'm really glad that they kept in.
Yeah,
I think it's one of my favourite characters in the books, though, and who in the David Lynch version is played by the great Patrick Stewart that we'll talk about in the news section, is Gurney Halleck.
Yeah,
and I remember in that TV version the actor that played him, I just thought was a terrible actor.
Oh dear.
And he just didn't seem to. He just didn't seem to be very good at acting. And that really caused me to struggle, because he's a really key character, and possibly my favourite character as well. And I just don't feel like they did him the justice that he deserved. But other than that, I think they did a good job of that TV series.
I actually prefer the TV series to the film. One, because it's a bit more updated in terms of it looks better, but two, they had more space to actually tell the story and include the things, where in the film you're obviously trying to cut and edit it down to get it to a decent length in the 1980s film, whereas this one, I think each episode's about an hour and a half, so you've potentially got 4 to 4.5 hours of material that they can use. And so one of the things I think I struggle the most with the film version is that all of the cast are very white.
Right.
And they're all very American. Well, yeah, obviously Sting, yes, I know, and Patrick Stewart. But they're really, really similar, and they all they look really familiar, and it's a bit of a struggle to dissociate from the characters and stuff. Whereas with the TV series, they filmed a lot of it, I think, I want to say in the Czech Republic. So they use a lot of local actors who are incredibly talented, but they look a little bit unusual. They've got slightly unusual accents for all the Fremen, which is what you want. You get people like William Hurt, who comes in as Duke Leto, and he's brilliant, and he's supposed to be that, and he's supposed to be very authoritarian, and it works. But then you get people like, I'm going to butcher his name, but an actor who plays Stilgar. Actually, I'm not even going to try his surname, it's impossible. He was amazing as Stilgar. I'd never seen him before in anything in my life. He's a German actor, I believe. And he was incredible, absolutely incredible, because he had this slightly otherworldly, interesting, spiritual feel to him, and I completely bought it. And then you've got Alec Newman bumbling around as Paul, because he is this kid who doesn't know anything, and yet by the end he's transformed. Oh, plus I also got to meet Ian McNeice, who played the Baron.
Nice.
He was lovely. He was such a nice guy. I had a good chat with him and talked about it. And the differences as well, he said. So Ian McNeice is a British actor, and he played Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. And he'd done lots of British TV, and then this was a sci-fi series. And he said, we went to Europe and we filmed there for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then there was the premiere in Los Angeles or something, I think it was. Sci-Fi flew him out and put him into a hotel, and he gets off the plane with his wife, and the car's driving. They take him to the hotel, and his wife kind of pokes him, and he says, what? And looks out the window, and there's about a 60-foot banner dangling down the side of the building with his face on it. And then 2 buildings over, there's a giant one of William Hurt, another 2 buildings, another one of Alec Newman. It's like, oh, wow, okay, they really do things big over here.
Oh, right.
So the scale was very different, very different.
So tell me how you're feeling about the new one directed by Denis Villeneuve. So first of all, what do you think? And I think I know the answer to this, but tell us what you think about Denis Villeneuve himself. I
think he's one of the best directors in the business at the moment, and he's one of the most original in terms of when there's a film that he's involved with, I will go and see it regardless. He's that good. He has done a few science fiction films, some of which I really, really love, some of which I thought were good. I even watched Sicario recently which has nothing to do with science fiction at all. It's quite a brutal film. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I haven't. I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it. I don't think.
Right. Well, it's a really, really brutal film about the drug trade and drugs coming in over the border from Mexico and the cartels into America, and they don't hold back. The screenplay doesn't hold back at all. It's pretty rough. There's some really nasty deaths and the action and top-notch cast and all the rest of it. Despite that, there are moments where I absolutely know it's a Denis Villeneuve film because despite everything that's going on, it was beautiful. And I never thought I'd say that, where people are being chopped up with cleavers and stuff in a film with drug cartels. And yeah, his name on it, I'll go and see it. On this, whoa, high expectations. But given what he did with Blade Runner 2049, which is one of my favourite films of the last 10 years, I'm very excited. What about you?
I agree completely. So probably Denis Villeneuve and Christopher Nolan are the two directors that it would be. All I need to know is that they directed it, and that's probably enough to get me to be interested and want to go and watch it. Before we started recording, I was looking up Denis Villeneuve and Dune and things like that, and it seems there's record of him basically saying that Dune is the film that he's always wanted to direct.
Wow.
And he absolutely loves the books, and he seems to be obsessed with the books. And like you say, Blade Runner 2049 is excellent. I think there's I don't think Arrival is anywhere near as good as that.
No,
but it's paced in a way that I find relieving. Like, it wasn't like, we need a set number of action sequences at this point in the movie and we're going to do it like this. It was its own film, and actually it just gives me faith that I can't think of anybody else alive at the moment that I think would be better placed to direct this.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm very excited. And the fact that they're doing it over 2 films as well, they're not rushing. So maybe they can get away with a 2-hour runtime for each film. I hope so, because then that's a 4-hour session. I can just sit down and enjoy the whole thing in one sitting. Have you seen who's been cast in one of your favourite characters then this time around?
As Gurney Halleck. Yes. It's Josh Brolin, isn't it?
Yes. What do you think of that?
So just absolutely brilliant casting, and it's not just that role as well. It just seems like great casting all the way across the board, as far as I can tell. Amazing
casting. Charlotte Rampling, as the Reverend Mother, that will be brilliant because she's an amazing actress anyway, and in this role, I can see her fitting perfectly. You've got Javier Bardem as Stilgar. There again, it's that thing I said where he's playing a Fremen. He needs to look a little different. He needs to sound a little different, and his natural accent will work perfectly. The only other person I thought that maybe could have been Stilgar is also from who watched in Sicario. His name is Benicio del Toro.
Oh, yeah, he would have been great as well.
He's the only other person I thought I could see playing. But do you want to talk about some of the other casting?
So somebody who I wasn't familiar with until it was announced that he was going to be in this is Timothy Chalamet or Chalamet.
Chalamet, I think.
I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, but he's playing Paul Atreides, who's if you know anything about the novels, is a major character, and he just has this amazing look to him, where you could quite believe that he's the subject of this galaxy-spanning prediction that he's going to rule the universe one day. Because there's just something about him where he looks ever so slightly otherworldly to me.
Yeah.
So there's him, but Jason Momoa as Duncan Idaho is, I think, another great piece of casting.
Yes, the soldier. the trainer, the one who teaches him everything. That's going to be interesting. Oscar Isaacs as Duke Leto, as his father. That, I think that's perfect too. Absolutely perfect. The only one that slightly worries me, and not because I don't know, not because I don't think he's a talented actor, I think he is. It's how far he goes into the role. Is Stellan Skarsgård as the Baron?
So the Baron is a strange role because it's something. It's there's peculiarities about the character.
Yes.
That is talked about in the book, and they do pretty faithfully in the 1984 film, and it looks strange on film the way that they do it. And it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see just how first of all how big a character the Baron is, and quite how far they choose to take that role. Yeah,
the other thing is, if the film's like a 12A, I hope it isn't. I hope they push it to a 15 or even an 18. But my gut tells me it'll be a 15. Because he has very strange proclivities as well. And there are certain scenes in the story that are important that relate to him because of that. So you can't dodge around it too much without changing the story. So it's this thing where he's not a mustache-twirling villain. He's a very layered character, and there's a lot of things to him. So I just hope Stellan really goes for it and really plays up all the different aspects of the character.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting. Like I think Stellan Skarsgård is a brilliant actor, and it'll be really interesting to see just exactly how he chooses to go about it.
Yeah. So the only other thing I was going to say is that in parallel to this film and two films that are coming out, Warner has also greenlit a Dune TV series.
Yeah, so this is something that you mentioned to me before we started recording, but I hadn't heard of this at all.
Okay.
So what is this going to be?
This is going to be called Dune: The Sisterhood, and it's going to be about the Bene Gesserits.
Right.
So Villeneuve said in a statement, the Bene Gesserits have always fascinated me. Focusing a series around that powerful order of women seemed not only to be relevant and inspiring, but a dynamic setting for a television series. So we don't know where it's going to be in terms of if it's going to be a prequel to the film, but it's going to be, he's involved with it. That's the good news. It's the same continuity it was going to, from what we can tell. So maybe it's going to be them building up to the moment of creating what they hope is the perfect person that then leads into the film. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. It'll be because in the books they're talked about in hushed tones, and they're astonishingly powerful, and they're clearly, manipulating society for their own aims.
Yes.
But they're not major characters in it. Like the Reverend Mother appears in it, relatively early on in the first book.
Yeah.
But and the Bene Gesserit gets talked about a lot, but they're not sort of heavily featured. But they're a really interesting sort of power behind the throne, and they're probably the one group of people that the Emperor is a little bit afraid of, because they're so powerful, and their power stems from something much more powerful than the Emperor. So it's really interesting to see how they'll handle that spin-off, but it sounds really cool.
Yeah. So it's at some point it's going to overlap in terms of if they're working on it now and the first film comes out in November, maybe the TV series will come out next year, and then you're suddenly going to get the second film. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they're going to do with that without it being a finite thing, unless they then tell stories between the books or something like that. So I don't know. But I just like the fact that he's involved with it. I like the fact that it's not something completely separate, that he's nowhere near. So even if he isn't directing the TV show, he'll be working on it to some degree and directing the flow of it and the feel of it. And I think that's where he really excels. So I'm excited, really excited.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's to me, it's just the absolute perfect marrying up of the right director with the right property. And I just think that he's going to do a brilliant job of it.
Yeah. It's going to be brilliant. Very, very excited. I think I'll be queuing up to see that as soon as it comes out, opening night. I'm not sure I'll do a midnight viewing, but I will be there. So, I think that's it for this episode. Have you seen any of the June previous versions? Have you read the book? If so, get in touch with us and let us know. You can get in touch with us in all the usual ways. You can email us, greatshowgeeks@gmail.com. You can come onto the Facebook group as well and talk to us there about all sorts of stuff. And don't forget to check out the Geek Syndicate website for all of the other podcasts as well on the feed. But for January 2020...
Wow.
Yeah, first episode of the new decade. It's good night from me.
And it's good night from him.
Good night.
Good night.